Sports stories, highlights, and scores. I'm Rishia Candidate. Former Major League slugger Mark McGwire may not be talking about his past, but his little brother Jay McGwire is. Deadspin.com reports that Jay has been shopping a book proposal claiming he introduced Mark to steroids and that his older sibling also used human growth hormone. In the proposal for The McGwire Family Secret, Jay says he introduced Mark to his supplier after winning a bodybuilding contest in 1994. The younger brother went on to detail Mark's use of decadurobulan to recover from workouts and ease joint pain. Jay McGwire admits that he and Mark are no longer on speaking terms. With reaction to this story, we welcome in ESPN The Magazine senior writer Tim Kurkjian. And Tim, what are your thoughts on what Jay McGwire is saying and trying to accomplish with regards to his brother Mark?
Well, it's pretty unclear exactly what's going on here. It's a possibility he's just trying to sell a book, perhaps at his brother's expense, which would be a little disappointing, you would think. And we just don't know really who Jay McGwire is. We really don't know his relationship with his brother. And until we find out exactly what would motivate him to do this, this story is going to stay pretty far up in the air.
Well, we do know that these two are not on speaking terms. That said, where does the credibility lie?
Well, again, we don't know how credible Jay McGwire is at this point, and this is just another case where you have to think logically we're going to have to hear from Mark McGwire at some point. He was the prime candidate for me well before any connection to steroids to be one of those guys who, once he left baseball, we might never see him again anyway. And now with the whole connection to steroids, we haven't heard from him in such a long time. But with more stories that come out like this, at some point we're going to have to hear from Mark McGwire to either defend himself or to clarify things. And I think that's going to have to be the next step in light of what Jay McGwire has said, assuming it's true and assuming the book is truthful in every way.
Tim, there has been discussion as to whether or not an open, honest admission or apology by Mark McGwire, one way or the other, would help or hinder his Hall of Fame chances. In light of his brother Jay and the plans for his book, what does that do with that particular argument?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that Mark McGwire needs to come clean on whatever he did or didn't do. That might have been something that he probably should have done in front of Congress that day. To me, from a distance, he was not counseled properly on how to answer questions that day. He certainly didn't lie, but I know friends of mine who don't vote for him for the Hall of Fame because of what he said that day in Congress. We are a forgiving society for the most part. You look at what happened to Andy Pettitte, he at least came out and said what he thought happened, and most people forgave him, and he moved on. I think if Mark McGwire were to come completely clean, again, with what he did and didn't do, he would be in much better shape than the shape he's in right now. So I think that's the first step, and I think as a forgiving society, we'll certainly listen to him.
ESPN The Magazine senior writer Tim Kurkjian, thank you so very much for your input on this matter.
Thank you.
A developing story on SportsCenter. In the past week, Mark McGwire's votes for the Hall of Fame declined from a year ago. His former manager, Tony La Russa, made a plea for him to speak out. And now McGwire's estranged brother shares pieces of a book proposal with Deadspin.com. In it, he claims that he introduced the slugger to steroids in 1994. And we want to note that calls to McGwire and his representatives have not yet been returned to SportsCenter. Here's from the book, quote, prior to the 1998 season, Mark had reached a level where he did not need to get any stronger. He couldn't afford to add any more weight. So I directed him to Andro, which is a non-hormonal, which is why it can be sold legally and not affected by the 2004 Anabolic Steroid Control Act and works naturally with your body. Andro increases strength and aggression while promoting reduction of body fat, leaner look to the physique. Using Andro allowed Mark to avoid all the potential adverse side effects that could come from using anabolic steroids, water retention, hair loss, liver, kidney or heart stress. In addition, he would not have cholesterol problems or testicular atrophy, and there were no problems with the law. My bringing the truth to the surface about Mark is out of love. I want Mark to live in truth, to see the light, to come to repentance so he can live in freedom, which is the only way to live. Again, McGwire is estranged from his brother. Let's get aboard the Mark McGwire Express. He broke into the majors in 1986, his first full season of 87. He had 49 home runs, Rookie of the Year. He was a Bash brother with Jose Canseco and helped lead the A's to the World Series in 89. Went to the Cardinals during the 97 season, was the face of the franchise. During the 98 year, he famously chased down Roger Maris's home run record alongside Sammy Sosa. March 17, 2005, McGwire was part of the congressional hearings on steroids. He famously refused to answer any questions about his past.
Mark McGwire's Hall of Fame candidacy has been hamstrung by the belief among voters he used performance-enhancing drugs. And new claims by his younger brother won't help. Jay McGwire wants to talk about his brother's past, peddling a book in which he writes he introduced the slugger to steroids in 1994. Jay McGwire, a former bodybuilder, also claims Mark used HGH. At the moment, the book has no publisher and no response from the subject. The McGwire brothers, not surprisingly, are not on speaking terms. Attempts to reach Mark McGwire for comment were unsuccessful.
I find it fascinating. We have two people, Jose Canseco and Jay McGwire, who would sell out family or teammates for anything. And they're in a war over who injected Mark McGwire first. I find this you couldn't make this stuff up. You really couldn't. Listen. I mean, I find it very sad that this guy is this pitiful character, and the only way he can make money is off his brother's name. I do say this. I mean, I think in 1994 we realized that Mark was in the middle of. He had the plantar. They had terrible problems with his feet. He played 74 games in 93 and 94. He had 18 home runs. It looked like his career was over. He had averaged 38 home runs a year for the first 6 years of his career, made the All-Star team every time, etc. But, I mean, this is going to go on. I guess it drags on. I don't know. I mean, there were people who for a while took Canseco's book seriously until Canseco exposed himself, essentially, and so that he lost all credibility. And I don't know where this book goes. I think that, I do think, though, and McGwire was certainly hurt by his time in front of Congress. Although, to this day, I'm not sure he's the only person who didn't go. I mean, he might be the only person who went there and didn't lie. But that's just by saying nothing. But because of what he's done for other people in the game. I mean, the way he takes the Duncan brothers and Steve Shoemaker and Matt Holliday, people he takes into his home and he pays for it and he coaches them. And a lot of things he's done in the game. There's so much that's good about McGwire. I agree with Tony La Russa. He should come out, and I think he should go to spring training with the Cardinals and sit down and say, you know what, I did this, I didn't do this, I did this. I think people will forgive, because I think because the Mitchell report essentially is as great as a college paper would be an incomplete. We really know so little about that era. I think by the time McGwire's Hall of Fame eligibility is up, we're going to find that probably 70% of people in baseball, golf, basketball, and football all did performance-enhancing drugs. That I think that he'll eventually make it in, but I think he'll make it in better if he makes himself more human.
You mentioned people would forgive. You also think that he would eventually get to Cooperstown. However, he actually lost votes this year, Peter, down to 118, woefully short of the 405 required. Do you think he would get there before his time, before the committee is done?
I think he can, and I think that in time, and I think when we know more about the era, when we're distanced from the era, I think that there'll be more forgiveness. I mean, we have to come to grips with a lot of players. And I'm not going to start throwing names around. There are a lot of players who have never been accused of anything except in maybe Jose Canseco's book, which is invalidated anyway. So that never tested positive, that didn't come up in the Mitchell report. There are a lot of players that within the game people think probably did do steroids. But you know what? They can't. I mean, I'll use for an example. Yeah, I mean, you can't vote against Sammy Sosa just by guessing. I don't think we in the media are qualified to administer tests that say, okay, this guy did, this guy didn't. And so therefore, those who were accused, I think in time, though, the more we do know about, and the more about that era, and the more that comes out, then I think that, I think there may be a perspective that will help McGwire. I think it will help Bonds if he doesn't go to jail. I think it'll help certain other guys whose names got thrown out there in time. I mean, I know the way this all goes, and I thought it was fascinating in the now that we have the Radomski book. This battle of the books with Radomski and Jay McGwire, Sarah Palin, it's unbelievable, all these people throwing books around. But I thought it was fascinating that Radomski talked about supplying performance-enhancing drugs for an NBA player. And it'll be interesting to see if that leads, or it's just that we so love the records of baseball. That's the only place we really look. And so that's one of those things that I think we determine in time. But just as I think in time, now that we know a lot about the Pittsburgh Steelers era of the 70s, we've forgiven.
It does, however, remain to be seen what these allegations, again, might do for him and his possible entrapment in Cooperstown. Peter Gammons, again, we very much appreciate the time this morning.
Thanks a lot.
Why'd you write the book, Mark and Me?
To set the record straight when it comes to Mark and his involvement in steroids and it's amazing how I came about and influenced someone at that time to influence and to do something like this, but also my story. I believe my book is relevant. I believe my book could help change people's lives and when they think about steroids and usage of steroids and the side effect of steroids.
When Mark got involved with steroids, could you talk about what got him started and why?
So I was well hooked up with the supplier, and I saw Mark hurt all the time. So I just said to Mark, there's something that you got to think about. This is something that can maybe change your career, ways of recovery.
When you suggested this or proposed this, what was his reaction?
He wasn't for it at first. It took a while. I actually just kept on pounding him about it, and I said, we could get you on some, a good training program to get your body changed. He's 230 pounds, and I just know the effects of steroids, what they could do. But his main motive was trying to get healthy.
How would you evaluate his confession?
I'm glad he came out. I'm glad he came and told the truth. He knows that, steroids is going to help him get stronger and develop his body. He should have told everyone else that was the truth.
When Mark reported to training camp in 1995 with the Oakland A's, after having worked out with you and started using the steroids in '94, what was the reaction within the camp when he showed up?
Oh, they called him the Hulk. They saw improvement. But he's not going to everyone, hey, I'm on steroids. But they saw improvement. Mark's body's changing.
Were people ever asking or suspicious of the fact that you were a bodybuilder and you work with Mark and Mark's suddenly getting significantly bigger? Did anybody ever say anything to you? Or
no one said anything. What
was your reaction as you watched his performance in 1998?
It was awesome. Fans are funny, As soon as he starts hitting home runs, they're kissing his butt. It just shows you that the fan wants to see things are freaky. Just records being broken. That's why wrestling's so big, and the fake wrestling, WWE. That's why the movies, usually the actors are strong and big. People like to see freaky people, produce.
Was Mark freaky?
I think he was freaky for a baseball player, absolutely. His forearms are 17.5 inches. His biceps were 19 plus. That's pretty freaky. His leg power is huge. If you see the before and after pictures, look back and look at him back in '98 and compare it to back in '88. It's just a huge difference. But I want to make it very clear that it wasn't just the drugs. People underestimate the training behind it. Mark bust his butt.
When Mark decided to take steroids and the human growth hormone, was there a discussion of what would ever, if it were to come out that he was using this stuff, how are you going to react to those questions?
Just keep it quiet. Mark and I had an understanding, and I had an understanding, just being around the sport, you just don't go out and tell everyone what you're doing.
One of those people that has talked about Mark's steroid use and his dabbling, if you will, is Jose Canseco. Jose claims that both he and Mark took turns injecting each other in the Oakland A's clubhouse, locker room, bathroom stall, or whatever. What do you know about that?
Can you see Mark and Jose in a bathroom stall shooting steroids? Just to think about that bathroom stall and two big guys like that, it's ridiculous. I know that for a fact. I just, there's no way. Mark is not the person that he's going to trust a guy like Jose. Even though they're teammates, I just knew Mark, that's just not the kind of guy that Mark hung out and trust.
What kind of relationship do you have with him now?
Nothing. It's sad. I haven't spoke to him since '02, and it's unfortunate.
What happened that caused that split in the relationship?
We had a family event at our house here, and my stepson ran into him, spilled coffee on him, and Mark overreacted and swatted him on the butt, and everyone was in shock, and I just told Mark that was my job to do, and it kind of just changed the relationship at that time, and my wife and I didn't go to his wedding.
What do you think he'd say if you were to read your book?
I actually defend Mark really well in this book, so if people thinking, I know when people are going to judge this book right away before they read it, I hope they read it, that I'm throwing them under the bus. I'm just going in details about the relationship I grew up with Mark the whole time since I was a kid, going all the way up to, influence him and taking these drugs and help him as a brother to have him perform better.
Has anyone who represents Mark or is involved with him, Major League Baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals, have any of those people reached out to you?
No. It's funny, huh?
Are you surprised by that?
Yes.
Why?
Well, you think you want to go to the core of the story, and no one's really suspected me. I've been the person all along.
101 ESPN.
Welcome to 101ESPN.com. I'm Brian Feldman. The big news from spring training today right outside of Roger Dean Stadium. Mark McGwire, the Cardinals hitting coach, his own brother, Jay McGwire, coming out with a book. It's not even really a tell-all. It's really everything that people already knew regarding the detailed steroid use of his brother Mark in the mid-1990s. And we got a chance to talk with Mark and Cardinals manager Tony La Russa regarding this book. And Mark McGwire is really just disappointed.
I've already come out and said what I've done and apologized, and as far as I'm concerned, there's really nothing new. As far as sort of sad as a brother what he's done, but I've moved on from it.
And Cardinals manager Tony La Russa pretty much agrees with Mark.
I mean, it's stuff that's already been gone over a bunch of times. I don't know what it's going to change.